Hi, welcome to Bible Walkthrough. I'm Adam Ayers,
I'm Wes Warner.
and on this episode we are dealing with head coverings. Should women wear head coverings, or is it a disgrace? Should men have long hair? I'm glad I don't have to answer that question for myself. Welcome to Bible Walkthrough. Balding men can rejoice everywhere.
So, what is Adam talking about?
That's a question we ask frequently.
Let's read the Bible scripture and see what's going on here. 1 Corinthians 11, 2 through 16. I praise you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions just as I pass them on to you. But I want you to know that Christ is the head of every man, and the man is the head of a woman, and God is the head of Christ. Any man who prays or prophesies with his head covered disgraces his head. But any woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered disgraces her head. For it is one and the same thing as having a shaved head. For if a woman will not cover her head, she should cut off her hair. But if it is disgraceful for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, she should cover her head. For a man should not have his head covered, since he is the image and the glory of God. But the woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for the sake of woman, but woman for man. For this reason, a woman should have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. In any case, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For just as woman came from man, so man comes through woman. But all things come from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. For her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone intends to quarrel about this, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. Is that the right translation? What's going on there?
Well, I differ with some of these points of translation, particularly where it says ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. That's not what the original text reads. The idea of it being a symbol is supplied by the translators here. It just simply says that she should have authority on her head because of the angels. That's a little problematic. The other one is in verse 16 where it says, if anyone intends to quarrel about this, we have no other practice. Now they're taking that from the ook there, the not, the negative particle there. But
You're speaking Greek now. It's good.
sorry, yeah,
It's good.
It's Greek to us, right? It's more of a grammatical, syntactical issue here. But I agree with those translators who translate the toiautein there as no such practice do we have. Really, we such a practice don't have. Neither do the churches of God.
Which is pretty much the opposite.
Yeah, it's. I think that this is not quite as clear of a translation as the ones that say no such practice. Especially when you read the whole pericope, it is problematic to say no other practice.
Yeah, because then it's illegal to be a Nazarite.
Yeah, or it's a disgrace to be a Nazarite.
It's a
'Cause
disgrace.
His point is that
Yes.
it's a disgrace, but if you look at Hebrew Bible, having long hair is never seen as a disgrace. Absalom, it makes a special point to say he was flawless in his beauty, and his hair, he grew it every year and cut it once a year, and it weighed, I forget, some amazing amount, like 100 shekels. And his hair is seen as a glory to him. So I think when we approach this, there's a couple of points theologically that have to be made. What comes to mind for me is that in Israelite worship, the high priest is commanded to have a turban on his head. to have a head covering with a plate that says "Holy to the Lord" on it, and he's supposed to wear this when he's doing the highest rites of Israelite worship, Day of Atonement, kinds of things. When he goes into the Holy of Holies, that's what he's supposed to do. So to say that Paul is saying it is transcendently or innately, intrinsically shameful or inappropriate to pray with your head covered if you're a man is a little bit problematic. And he would have been aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Absolutely.
from a missiological hermeneutic perspective, I think it's very, very important to look at verse 2, where he says, I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. So his argument here is really not about transcendent Christian morality or practice. Mm-hmm. He's talking about how well do you keep the traditions that I passed to you. So there's something going on, and this is in a section of 1 Corinthians, where he's correcting a number of practices in the Corinthian church, eating things that are offered to idols, how they practice the Lord's Supper, and he's correcting a lot of their behaviors to be in line with Paul's understanding of how they should conduct themselves in the church. And he'll go on to do other things, how they conduct themselves in their worship using the glossolalia, the speaking in tongues and things like that. So he's talking about whether or not they are holding to certain traditions that he has passed to them. And apparently he's talking about whether or not the women are willing to wear head coverings as a sign that they are under authority. So, I'm sorry, but what comes to mind for me as a child of the 70s is an old phrase from the women's lib movement. That there was a slogan where they would say, "Come on, Ma, burn your bra." Okay, and it appears that the letter of 1 Corinthians, it appears that the Corinthian church has women in it who are having this "Come on, Ma, burn your bra" idea, and that they are disrupting the church by their refusal to do certain things that are considered to be basic modesty in a society. Now, one could make an argument against wearing, women wearing tops. Many cultures, they don't wear tops. But just because someone is free culturally as a Christian doesn't mean that you have the right to offend by taking up a practice that is considered to be beyond modesty in a culture, in a society. And I think that's why Paul says, you judge for yourselves. And that's a key caveat in this, that he says, you have to judge for yourselves. You know what you consider to be modesty. Don't violate what you know and what you consider to be modesty. Never mind that none of the other churches do it that way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's also interesting the part where he talks about the angels. I think it's interesting that the angels are sensitive to the people in the church respecting the established authority, and that they somehow have a sensitivity to that is interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's cool.
I believe some commentators interpret that based out of Enoch and out of the Nephilim story in Genesis, that if women don't cover their hair, that angels will be tempted.
Oh my goodness!
I think that's a far-fetched interpretation.
I can hear how they would get that.
They get that.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's more what you're saying, that angels are sensitive to authority. If we read in Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar boasts, and he is smitten with madness. And it says, by command of the watchers. It's not a divine decree. It's by command of the watchers. Mm-hmm. So apparently in Hebrew tradition, there is an understanding that there are angels, watchers, who are like the custodians or the enforcers of correct authority structures. Mm-hmm. Because the watchers in Daniel declare that Nebuchadnezzar will go mad until he learns to recognize the ascendancy of Yahweh,
right,
of the Lord.
So like a disruption in that authority could cause some kind of disturbance in the angels. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Or bring about vengeance or discipline.
Very interesting.
Sort of the God Stapo.
Yeah, we got to do something about that. Mm-hmm. Huh? Yeah.
So yeah, these arguments, about being shorn or shaven and having the head covered and being the image and glory of God are really his way of getting to a practice that he's saying it's offensive to you. You are being too full of arrogance and presumption. Mm-hmm. You're putting yourself out of an authority place by thinking that you have the individual right, or your little group of individuals have the right to cast all cultural tradition to the wind and be offensive to anyone simply because you are free in Christ. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the thrust of the passage.
That makes sense. And to me, the biggest hitch on understanding this passage is that last sentence in 16 and the way it's translated in some versions of the Bible.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the ballast line. It is. Yeah. That's his. Hey, look, if you're just going to make an argument about this.
Yeah. So the way that you believe as a scholar that it should be correctly translated is,
we have no such practice.
We have no. So if anyone intends to be contentious or quarrel about the length of hair or head coverings, then we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. Mm-hmm. So he's saying, if you're going to fight about this thing, then it's no big deal. Just let it go.
But it could be, if you're being contentious, you better toe the line. Yeah.
Or the opposite way?
Yeah, that's the opposite way. I just don't think that's the better reading.
Yeah, I can hear that too.
Yeah.
I don't think so either.
What it certainly reveals is that Paul is anticipating a contentious receiver. That's the whole point, that someone's being contentious here. That's why we're having this problem. People are being contentious. And it follows because that's part of what's going on in the taking of the Lord's Supper later on in the chapter. There are people who are being full of strife and competitive. So yeah, you're right. That's the ballast line.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. It's surprising to me that it could be so differently translated, you know?
Yeah. The joys of translation.
Yeah, really.
Sometimes you just got to make a decision.
I know, it's a tough job. It really is.
I think there's enough in the pericope to constrain the meaning even without that last construction.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
The judge for yourself.
Judge for yourselves is a big point there. Mm-hmm. And his instruction or his opener about tradition. Mm-hmm. Both of those say, look, I'm dealing with contentious people and I just don't want you to act this way. And the theological reasoning is there to support that point, more like an illustration than it is arguing from theology to a point. He's starting at a point and then casting the theology as an illustration to support it. So it could be incidental. In fact, it is incidental. Of course, this could open a can of worms. There's still a lot to be covered in this passage, but this is just the walkthrough to get you through the basics. If you'd like to focus in on one of the other verses, feel free to send us an email or request at BibleWalkthrough.com. But until that time, we'll see you next text and next time on Bible Walkthrough. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.